If you've spent time building with Claude, you've probably run into this situation. The project is going well, you ask for one more change, and something stops working. The version from 10 minutes ago was fine, but you no longer have it, and you're not entirely sure which change caused the problem. You can ask Claude to repair it, and often that works, but sometimes each attempted fix takes you a little further from the version that was working. What you want in that moment is the ability to go back. That ability is what GitHub gives you, and it's the subject of this video. GitHub is a service that stores copies of your project. Each time you send your work to it, GitHub keeps that version alongside every version you've sent before, in order, going back to the very first one. So if today's version is broken, yesterday's version still exists, exactly as it was. A reasonable way to picture it is a filing cabinet for your project, where every version you send gets its own folder with a date on it, and nothing is ever thrown away. GitHub is a large tool, and most of its features exist for professional teams shipping software at scale. We won't be covering those. This video covers the small portion you need as someone building with Claude, enough to keep your work safe and collaborate with one other person. Setting up takes 3 steps, and we'll move through them quickly because GitHub's own documentation explains each one well. First, you create an account and sign in. Second, you add what's called an SSH key. You can think of this as a form of identification your computer presents to GitHub, so that GitHub knows work coming from your machine is really from you. Third, you install the GitHub CLI, a small program that lets Claude communicate with GitHub on your behalf. The links for each step are in the description. Follow them once, and you're set up on this computer. Now, suppose you already have a project you've been building with Claude, sitting in a folder on your computer. You don't need to visit GitHub's website to set anything up. Instead, open Claude in that project's folder and make a simple request. Create a private GitHub repository for this project and push my current work to it. That request uses 2 terms you haven't seen yet. A repository, usually shortened to repo, is the storage space GitHub assigns to a single project. One project, one repository. And push is the standard word for sending your latest work up to GitHub. You'll also notice the word private. A public repository can be viewed by anyone on the internet. A private one can only be seen by people you've specifically invited. If you're building a product that hasn't launched yet, private is the appropriate default. When you make that request, Claude creates the repository and uploads your files using the CLI you installed earlier. Some files, though, should never leave your computer. Passwords, API keys, anything that unlocks an account or a service. That applies even to a private repository. Private controls who can see the project, but secrets shouldn't be sitting in it at all. Claude normally keeps these files out on its own, but state it explicitly when you create the repository. Make sure no passwords or secret keys are included. And if one does end up on GitHub, treat it as exposed. Replace that key or password. From then on, whenever Claude has made changes you're satisfied with, ask it to push them to GitHub. Do this often. Once your work is on GitHub, it no longer lives only on your computer. A hardware failure, a bad update, an accidentally deleted folder, none of these can cost you the project because a complete copy exists elsewhere. This works in the other direction as well. Sending work up to GitHub is called pushing. Bringing it down is called pulling. If your laptop dies or you buy a new one, you run the same 3 setup steps on the new machine. Each computer needs its own SSH key. Then ask Claude to fetch your project from GitHub and continue where you left off. Suppose now that you're building with a partner and you're both making changes to the same project. In professional settings, teams review each other's code before it's combined. That isn't the situation here. Neither of you is reading code line by line. You're each building with Claude and testing whether the result behaves correctly. So the working agreement is simpler, and it uses both directions you already know. Pull when you sit down to work, so you start from your partner's latest version, and push when you finish something that works, so your partner can do the same. Keep that rhythm, and neither of you is ever building on top of stale work. Occasionally, you'll both modify the same part of the project at the same time, and those changes will conflict. A developer would resolve this by reading both versions of the code and deciding what the final version should contain. You'll resolve it differently. You describe to Claude what your change was meant to do, what your partner's change was meant to do, and what the end result should look like. You make the decision about the outcome, and Claude does the code-level work to get there. Remember the broken change from the start of this video and the working version you couldn't get back? Suppose that this time you had been pushing your changes to GitHub all along. When something breaks and the fixes aren't landing, you can now say to Claude, look through the project's history. The login page was working a few changes back. Find that version and bring it back. Claude reads the history, identifies where the problem came in, and works with you to restore a working state. There's much more to GitHub, and the resources linked below will take you further when you're ready. For now, push your work, keep it private, and build.